come to it at last. No preamble. We're just going to dive right into what is, in fact, one of the most controversial, perhaps most debated television episodes in the history of the medium. Episode 17, Fallout. I think we should start. I would love to start and get your opinion about where do you think the prisoner now, as we've now looked back on the entire show from the perspective of 2020, do you think this show has remained relevant over this last more than now half a century? And do you think audiences of today can sit down and watch the entirety of this series and get something out of it?
I think this show is better than 95% of TV today. Not only in terms of quality, but in terms of relevance. Because 53 years ago, this show was very much written from a singular perspective, from the individual perspective. And the beauty about the individual perspective is it doesn't have bias because you put yourself in the individual.
Right.
So there's no bias. There's no agenda. It's just about the individual and how the individual fits into society. And I think that is more relevant today than ever. And I think that's the beauty of the show. Why people like you and I can talk about it and discuss and debate the themes, the ideas, the ideology all behind it, and why we can watch a show over half a century, made over half a century ago, and say that fits with today.
Well, that kind of was what I was hoping you would say that, because in some of our great franchises and a lot of what's been happening in entertainment now, everyone is trying to make their entertainments relevant to today, to be fashionable of the moment. And I think one of the great things about especially 60s television, whether it was what Rod Serling was doing with The Twilight Zone or Leslie Stevens was doing with Outer Limits, what they were doing with Star Trek and a number of other shows, I think there was an attempt to make these stories timeless.
Yes.
And I think like
evergreen,
evergreen stories. And, like the works of Shakespeare have endured because they are full of basic human truths that are constantly reaffirmed generation after generation after generation because of what human nature is. And when you start playing to fashions of the time, ideologies that might be popular today, your shows end up becoming horribly dated in a very short period of time. The current
like pop culture references.
Absolutely. Pop culture references immediately date a show. And what's so interesting about The Prisoner is knowing that, this episode opens with basically a thank you to Portmeirion, which plays it was a wonderful way to honor the location, and they could have waited till the end of the episode, but boom, this opens right away and says thank you. It opens different than any other episode, and Portmeirion itself is pretty much as you saw it 50 years ago. And
I've been to Portmeirion once. I've had the luxury and the pleasure of going there myself, and that was back in '98. I went to Portmeirion, and the only thing that was different was the green dome is now a copper dome because of
they cleaned it.
Yeah, well, because of the light. Yeah, so that's the only reason. That's the only change that was. Well, I say the only change. There was some guard railings put up here or there, but essentially it was the same place, and it's remained this pretty much since he started constructing it back in I think the 30s.
Right.
when Clough William Ellis started to build the place, but we get a previously on The Prisoner at the beginning, but we also get the brilliant Fallout theme.
Yes.
which is the prisoner right. The reason why I'm going to just gush over this for a second, by the way, is because it's, oh God, I could cry. It's the artistic nature of this show. Everything is done for a purpose. And it was all building up to fallout. And so instead of having, the beginning segment and then, he looks through the mirror, fallout, and then it starts. No, we don't have any of that. It's all gone. He's no longer arriving in the village and looking out the window and we're getting our thing. No, that's over. This is the end game now. This is finito. We're in the final stage. And so we get the overhead view of Portmeirion. We get the helicopter shots, and then we get what would, in today's terminology, be referred to as the wahs, which you got from Inception. The Inception wahs, because instead of just going it's like duh, 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 duh. It's like built up to the crescendo of the episode. A very clever thing that was done with music in recent history was the David Tennant run of Doctor Who. He had his theme tune, and that would go when he was in the series. And then when Tennant announced that he was leaving the show, but he would film 4 specials before he left, every one of the specials ramped up the theme. And so by the final one, you were getting ba-dum, 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 dum, dum, dum. It really built it up and built it up and built it up. And it was just a clever, artistic thing that fit the role. This was a doctor coming to the end of his life. This here was a show that was coming to its finality. There was no more Prisoner, no more Series 2. This was a finite project. And so to have that wonderful Fallout theme, like I said, I could cry. I could cry. Just things like that. We have such sanitized television nowadays. We have such sanitized shows. We have such sanitized politicians. We have such sanitized celebrities, musicians. Everything's so sanitized. A musician is controversial now because they come on Twitter and go, "I got beef with Jezza X." Oh my God. And it's just so nice to have that age where things weren't, where things were so free and open for expression that you just got little nuances like this which capped stuff off.
Well, and also people were expected to be actual people. You can you imagine Johnny Rotten or Sid Vicious in today's world? The idea that pop stars or whatever, they were rude, surly, rebels. They destroyed hotel rooms. They had their way with groupies. They led a life of hedonism, and that was what was fueling their art, and that's why we love their work. And people lived hard. They went down those rough roads, and that's what they brought to their artwork. And we expected that, and that was what human experience was. And also, The Prisoner was born of the time of counterculture, and a lot of that is reflected in this particular episode. And you had, I thought it was very telling that the Beatles, which you could never license if you tried to make this show today, begins this episode, and the idea that there are multiple jukeboxes in the beginning of this episode because, back in the day, and especially in the UK, pop music has always been a unifying force, and it's not just youth, it's everybody. I've always loved the fact that in the UK that pop music has always been, it's not just young people, it's the whole country listens to it. And I think that my experience in America, even though it's sort of funny, in the movie Love Actually, part of the plot of that movie is who's going to be the #1 Christmas song.
Yes.
And the whole country is all about that. It's not just about, and it was a thing. And I'm like, I love the fact that that pop music, and still to this day, whether you're reading Emmy or any of the British music magazines, it's still that way. I mean, but you can speak to this more than I can, obviously, but that pop culture, music culture is a countrywide phenomenon that everybody is sort of aware of. And there's a reason why Live Aid was born out of Bob Geldof's desire to use popular music, rock and roll, to help victims of African famine back in the mid-'80s. And
not allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was a really interesting time, and I love that this episode is sort of mindful of that throughout. We've seen him go to a record store in London, and the fact that jukeboxes were sort of ubiquitous. They were in pubs and all over the place, and again, the idea that you can choose music, and the Beatles were playing.
Danger Man episode, the ubiquitous Mr. Lovegrove.
The ubiquitous Mr. Lovegrove. And I think that that's definitely something that was in Patrick McGoohan's mind. And the idea of whether it was Timothy Leary, expand your mind through LSD, is this entire episode his drug-fueled trip through his own mind, which I think that there's an argument to be made that maybe it is, but that means that it also reinforces the idea that, well, number one is maybe the soul of number 6 or whatever. There's so many different readings of this episode. I don't want to. We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But
I've got my own theory. Again, when I watched this when I was 15 years old, I don't have the life experience to even contemplate forging an opinion about this episode. Looking back, and I know I've seen it since. But it's been it's probably been a good 10 years since I saw the prisoner. Well, 7 years since I've seen The Prisoner, and just watching Fallout today, I loved it.
I did too.
I really it went so quickly. I really just kind of felt not necessarily understood. I'm going to retract that because I think that's egotistical for this episode. I formulated ideas about what I thought was going on, and I hadn't really been able to do that before. But for some reason, I just started to think, well, this could represent this, and this could represent that, and even all the way through to the end. The interpretations are quite open, but this is, as you mentioned at the beginning, such a controversial. People wanted I think people were expecting a more conformist ending.
Yeah, a traditional narrative where a secret would be revealed. But I think that one of the things that makes this show as great as it is because we're trained by our entertainments to be given answers. And especially, can you imagine watching this when it first aired, being like an American audience when this was playing in America, and you're waiting to find out what happens, and I can't imagine what this was like for audiences of the late 60s in the US to encounter this for the first time, when you were getting, television that was sponsored by dishwashing soap or something, and then you come to this. After
I know what McGoohan did when this came out. He was in hiding for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it was like. But on the other hand, society was going through. We were expanding our minds. Whether it was we had gone through the summer of love. You had ideas about women's rights and free love and racial equality and psychedelia, and there was so much going on, expanding your consciousness. So in a way, the social upheaval of the late 60s played right into this episode. Yeah. In terms of, if you wanted, it's so funny because if you wanted to encapsulate all of that, this episode does a pretty good job of being a product of its time and yet also being timeless.
Yeah, I think I was going to say supernatural. That's not the word I'm looking for. The surreal.
Yes.
The surreal element of the episode allows that to happen, because when you do start to deal in the surreal, then it is open for interpretation. McGoohan himself said, I don't know what this is about. I think McGoohan was probably doing himself a wee bit of a disservice. I think McGoohan probably had a very which we'll go into, but I think he had a decent idea about where he wanted this episode to go.
He did write and direct it.
Yes, it was just a matter of trying to put when we start to deal with the themes, I'll become a little less tangled. But when you try to deal with the themes that I think he's trying to deal with, and present them in an interesting, entertaining way that is open for interpretation, then yes, you do get this sort of crazy menage of what was going on. And yeah, there's just something today that just connected with me with this.
Oh, me too. Watching it now, I think that the theme, obviously, the theme of the individual still is first and foremost front and center in this episode. Literally on stage, front and center, and in many different ways. And what I find really interesting is this does open with a recap of the previous episode.
Yeah.
And even though the previous episode was shot like a year before this one, they want to reinforce that, nope, this is an absolute continuation. We're going right back in. And
Previously in the prison.
Yeah, I think that it's what I really do love is that it really picks up right where we left off from Once Upon a Time. The prisoner with the controller, the what's his name, our character that oversees everything. Walks him down into underneath the village. He goes even deeper than he did before, and he's entered into basically a Bond villain's lair. He passes by,
but before he does, he takes him to the changing room.
Yes, he does,
because he says, "I thought you'd feel better as yourself."
And how interesting that is.
I think because I think my personal theory is we're dealing with ego.
Yes,
we're dealing with the ego. The ego is on display here, and the ego is fragmented into different people. So I think that's what's on display here, because the village is now this is a really interesting thing to explore, because the whole thing has been about destroying his individuality. It has been about trying to force him to conform, to comply, to become a cog. They haven't been able to do that. So instead now of trying to break down the individual, we're going to break down the ego of what makes the individual. And I think that is really interesting, because instead of McGoohan versus the village, or number 6 versus the village, this is essentially 6 versus 6.
Well, it's really interesting that it's not like they had a whole room full of all of the people in the village. When they take 6 in, it's only him. He's the only one, and he's confronting himself, and I think you're right. So, I think that's
what I think it is. Yeah,
and it's definitely part and parcel of that, at least. And they want to make.
Sorry, go on.
Well, they make him because they do that stop. They're showing him something and the audience something. They didn't have to do that. They could have gone right in, but they, like you said, they had to stop and show that. And also, I think the fact that they already had this room prepared. It's been about him the whole time.
Yes,
this is this outcome was anticipated from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, and in a way, everything has now gone as planned, really, because they were hoping it would. They were hoping it would get to this point.
Yeah. This is why he has to put on his original clothes, because he must address them as the individual, as the ego. And so yes, in relation to the episode, the villagers wanted this moment. To me, it looks like it's been prepared for others as well, who have not necessarily lived up to the task. But with number 6, this one's always been, since Leo McKern's number 2 came on the scene, this has always been about a battle of wills between those two characters. And so to reincorporate what I believe is Leo McKern's number 2 as a part of an extension of his ego in this episode, I thought was a very clever idea, because each of the characters seem to represent a facet of the individuality, and how chaotic they are separate. But look what happens when you bring all of it together. Angelo Muscat as the butler, number 2, number 42, number 6, the fragments of the ego. And I viewed the because with him on the throne, it's a very grandiose thing. It's, in fact, I thought it was saying it was kind of not necessarily a good part of number 6. It was the sort of the uber ego. It was the arrogance of him. It was those elements. So he's there on his throne, and he's looking down at the others, because they're asking you teach us how to be an individual. We want you to teach us. And so he just as a almost like a medieval queen, let them eat cake, looks at everything that's going on with number 42. I don't know if I read too much into the dem bones, but the song is Ezekiel got them dry bones, and Ezekiel was essentially the prophet of doom, who foresaw the fall of Jerusalem, I believe. So if that was the element of bringing that song into it, the youth being a destructive force because it has no direction. And so you have this, Alexis Canner just running around, singing this song, ringing this bell, just antagonizing authority, because that's what youth does. Because youth doesn't conform. Youth challenges, always challenges. I think you wanted to come in.
But I also see, I was taking it even more literally, that he is literally a skeleton. He is literally Mr. Death. He's become, because he is dead. His character's dead now. It's been resurrected. And I saw him, he even kind of imagine him as a skeleton. The way he moves, he's like out of an animated, a cartoon or something, a living skeleton who's running around, and he's the chaos bringer. And he was, and the fact that they brought him back not as his agent self, but as the character in The Girl Who Was Death, in Living in Harmony, he's that the gunfighter, they brought him back as the character as opposed to the real person. He was not the agent at the end that is revealed. He's that character from Harmony, and the kid, that's who he is. And the kid has now come back as whether you want to call him Loki, like you said, that he's a combination of all of that. And he's it's funny that he's youth. All of youth thinks that they're invulnerable and they have all the time in the world left. And he represents a youth that will eventually die as well. I mean, the folly of youth is that they don't understand death, and he is the living embodiment of youth that has died. And that there's a lot going on there, at least for me. And then what I loved is, of course, the judge, before he's even introduced, the judge starts talking about things like humanity, being a human being, is in itself a crucible. It's hard. It's pain. A human being, to be a human is to be, you're forged. You're put in some kind of a spiritual foundry. You are. It isn't easy to be a human being. It's pain and it's suffering, and it's you have to stand up against it. You gotta toughen up. And he says that's what to be human is. To be human is basically to go through hell. That's what you have to do. And our human lives there's never a moment where happiness is fleeting, but it is a painful slog But if you can retain your individualism throughout the face of all of this, then you get your just rewards at some point. And of all people, number 6 is he's getting his rewards, because through all the hell they put him through, he didn't bend, he didn't break, he maintained. Whereas the kid and number 2, well, they certainly broke. And something along. I mean, as I was watching this, I was formulating like all of these ideas, but and also the jury. You know, you look at the jury, and the jury that's there, the faceless masses that are out there.
They're great. They're great because they're all branded. They all have their labels, and they're all the same.
And it's so great. They're given all and every different facet. It bums me out that I kept stopping and going back and looking and seeing if I could read the names that were up in the next tiers. You know, and all
trees. There was youth in there, you know,
all the different elements of society. I mean, basically, it's civilization. You know, that the jury is civilization, and yet, like you said, they're all the same.
But what's even, I mean, I thought that was amazing when I started to read their labels. I was just like, I never twigged to read them before.
Right.
And of course, today, sorry, we're going to have to get into that political aspect of it today. But today, of course, we have a group of people running around talking about how virtuous they are, how progressive they are, you know, how inclusive we are. In a fascistic way.
Right. Oh. Well, what's even worse is they've put themselves into a position where they are claiming they are better than you.
Yes.
And if you do not capitulate and bend to their wisdom, you will be destroyed. You will be burned at the stake, canceled.
You can put them right next to Nazis, right next to fascists, right next to reactionaries, and it fits perfectly. And that was I did really love and appreciate that in this episode, because now I understood who they were and what they stood for. Whereas before I just thought it's some, you know, quirky dress and that, you know, why they're on. But, you know, just understanding now that element of it and having experienced it through life. And it was just, you know, it's so clever to see those. And of course, when the supervisor hands him over, he puts his own on and he joins the rest. So there's the huge group, and then there's the 4 of the other separate 4, the main 4. There's another callback as well. The person for the general, the guy from the general who picks him up on the beach, who is then later on in a change of mind, repenting for his sins and giving himself over to the village. He is one of the people. He's the guy that stands up and gives the speech, with the one with the mask on.
Yeah.
So again, it was just like we get this little sort of journey. We get this little journey of this guy as well. And I thought, yeah, you could be reusing the actor, but at the same time, if we say it's the same character throughout the process, then there's an interesting little arc about being part of the system, failing the system, being broken and molded by the system. So yeah, that element was great, but it wasn't Kenneth Griffiths as the judge. Just
amazing. I mean, he's his. I loved him. I loved his character, and just the things he said. I mean, it really resonated with me now. I mean, I think when I watched this when I was a younger man, the problem that I always had with this episode, and I always felt like today, it felt like the episode was like 20 minutes long. And before, it always felt like kind of a slog to me, because I was looking for that traditional narrative. I was looking for it, but now when I watch it, to me, it's far more compelling, because I really kind of get every moment. While it's surreal, I mean, you're getting it, reading and seeing all the name on Blu-ray. you can really see the names of like the jury and where they all come from, the different walks of life and professions and labels and all of that. And then you're suddenly like, okay, man, yeah, I get it now. You know, and then I love when they go and they to resurrect number 2 and they keep playing his scream like over his voice over and over and over again, and I was captivated by this episode now more than I've ever been in the past, because it feels so now. It feels so what's going on today in our society. I feel like we're all McGoohan and we're all being judged all the time, especially in the midst of a global pandemic.
We are. We go to social media, go to Twitter. Look, take the Elliot Page. I will call them by the name. Take the Elliot Page stuff yesterday. There were some people that were confused. There were some people that wanted to make, not so nice comments. There were people who wanted to joke about it. There were some funny jokes. You can't deny it, Oh, Ellen Page has moved into her final form as a straight white male. You know what I mean? There's just funny things, because obviously straight white males, people are against nowadays. So you have that, but you get people that are banned left, right, and center yesterday on Twitter for dead naming. Me yesterday, not you. Yesterday I took a 7-day ban on Twitter because I called somebody an artard. We're being judged in my speech is being judged by this platform,
right?
So regardless of I didn't call it directly to somebody. I responded to somebody who was having an interaction with somebody else, and I said, well, they're just a da-da-da. YouTube isn't going to stop us from saying it. Parler won't stop me from saying it, but now we know the kind of platform Twitter is, and we know the kind of politics and the leaning of it. We know the lies that Jack's been telling. We know everything that's starting to come out about mainstream media and its manipulation and everything like that. And they are judging everything. You get judged whether or not you get a passport, a credit card. You get judged whether or not you can get yourself a mortgage to buy a house. There are elements of society all over the place, regardless of whether it's political or non-political, where you are persistently being judged. You meet your peers, they're judging you, you're judging them.
Well, and what's really interesting too is all of this judgment is removing individuality away from each and every one of us. And it's insidious because it's like, for instance, in terms of words. Now, of course, if you say words are violence, one word, if it's not used correctly, suddenly becomes, oh, well, that's not very nice. And why are we obligated necessarily? I think being nice to other people helps build a strong society. I think that being polite and being mindful of other people is a good thing. But on the other hand, there's words that exist. So why has one word been deemed bad when describing something, and yet another word? I don't know if you saw this controversy, but there's a longtime Star Trek fan who does not speak English as his first language and made the mistake of using the term colored people instead of people of color. Literally reversed the words and got destroyed by it. And he had to come make an apology. But we also have an organization, the NAACP here in this country, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That's an actual organization. And yet you put one word, and for somebody who doesn't speak English as their first language, they're not trying to be offensive. They're not trying to be racist. I mean, now it's like BIPOC, but all these terms, and here's this poor guy who's trying to make a point, and all of a sudden he gets pilloried because he literally reversed 2 English words.
Yeah.
And they burned him at the stake, when clearly his meaning, if you read his statement, was not a racist statement at all. He was making something totally different, and yet people jump all over him. What about what he's really trying to say? What about?
Well, they're not interested in what you're really trying to say. I call it the gotcha game. They're looking for the gotcha. They're looking for the moment that they can jump and pounce on you. That's the moment they're looking for. These are very intolerant people. The artard word that I used, I wouldn't say it to somebody with a legitimate learning disability. I would find that cruel.
Sure.
But to call somebody who poses as an intelligent compos mentis human being, that I think is fair game as a put down. Particularly when these people think they come out with some Einstein theory and it's just stupidity. Because that's what we get a lot of. We get a lot of the stupidity element of it. But this is where we are. We are being judged constantly and in everything that we do. We have the likes and the dislikes. We have the comment sections. All of it. I'm just referring to the work that we do. I'm not saying this is the be all and end all.
Sure.
But in relation to our work, we're being judged. How did this video do? It got a 96% ratio. Oh, that's... the other one got 98, even though they're still great. You know, there's 96, 98. Who cares? They're brilliant. But, you know, we'd be judged. Oh, why did I lose that 2%? Or, again, oh, I got 2% more. What did I do in that video that was more appealing to... Judged.
I mean, literally in this scene, we have a judge, the literally a judge with a gavel, at the beginning of this episode, and now.
Sorry. Just jump in there. Sorry, because I want you to respond to this actually. But let's take television as well. What rose to prominence over the last 15, 20 years of television? Judge Me shows.
Right.
America's Got Talent, Pop Idol, all these different shows about people wanting to be it begins with P, the word I want to say procrastinate, it's not laid out in front of the cruelest of people for sport.
Well, it started with Survivor. You know, the game Survivor here, where strangers are put on an island. You have to make allegiances. You literally have to backstab people and to survive. And it's a contest. And no one was killing anybody, but it might as well be. You know, we're one step away from the Hunger Games or putting people into rings and watching them fight to the death. You know,
I'm thinking 10 years.
Give it time.
10 years from now.
I mean, give it. And what's so strange about what I think, you know, this idea of our culture now, cancel culture, gotcha culture. What that is bloodsport. To me, it's one step away from the mob stringing you up. I mean, I've met people have said things to me.
It's the Coliseum.
And I've had I've had conversations with people where I know, get their ire up and listening to some of the rhetoric they spew back at me, that if I was in a place where they had pitchforks and lighter fluid and flames, I wouldn't put it past some people, if they were fired up enough, that my life would be in danger.
But that's the thing with a witch trial, because a witch trial is you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So your guilt or innocence is irrelevant. You're gone.
Yeah. Oh, you're gone.
That's the cancellation element of it. Rosario Dawson, she exhibits externally all the elements of what a certain side believe in. She is a woman of color. She is a left progressionist. However, all that they needed to turn was a rumor, a speculation, and even when that person that put the charges against her retracted them all against her, leaving only 2, that was 28 or 18 gone, leaving, I think, only 2 for Rosario Dawson's mother remaining, I was still dealing with imbeciles. I would say another word, Robert, but I respect your channel. I was dealing with imbeciles that weren't even, they didn't care. They didn't care about that because the idea had already been implanted, and that's all they needed.
Oh,
all they needed.
And it's terrifying that it's come to this. Like, what I find very interesting is on social media, I try and treat people the way I would want them, unless we're talking about the writing staff of Star Trek Discovery, in which case they're creating art, so I feel like they're fair game. But there are people, fellow Star Trek fans, who, because of my opinion, they've said some really horrible things about me, and then they go post them on social media, and I've gone, my defense is that, hey, if you really feel that way about me, why don't you come live on my YouTube channel and let's have a conversation?
Yeah, I watched your show the other night when you said that.
Yeah, and none of them have taken me up on it.
No,
but that's the thing, and what I find interesting is that I've never feared ideas. You know, I watch a wide spectrum of people on the internet, people from all sides. And there's a lot of people that are like, why do you watch this person? Or why do you watch that person? And I'm like, why wouldn't I? You know, I don't understand this idea that you shouldn't watch these people. I'm like, they're people. They have ideas. They have opinions. And, you know, I was watching Gary on OAN, you know, the network that is certainly, you know, a Trump-supporting network that a lot of people I know would be like, you're watching that? And I'm like, I thought it was interesting that he was on the channel and wanted to hear what he had to say about California. You know, I've really been interested listening to the saga of what happened to his wife's business in San Francisco, and I think, look, whether, like, I like Gary, and whether you do or don't, this is I think a very relevant, valid experience that he's and his family have been having that is worth a human experience that is worth listening to. You know, and I think it's important. And a lot of people then turn around and go, well, you support this kind of person. I'm like, no, I support a fellow human being and an action figure fan who loves science fiction, fantasy, and horror and comics as much as I do, that is having a certain experience in the world that is very relevant, and I think it's important to understand. And yet there are people that are going to make these overarching, just incredible. They're gonna have their opinions formed and decide, let's burn this person at the stake. And what's so strange to me is where and how did we get there? Do we really want to bring the Colosseum and gladiatorial combat back based on somebody's ideological opinions? I mean, is that where we're at?
I would hate to be the kind of person that formulates all their opinion based on where somebody ticks a box once every 4 years. I would hate that. Even I was watching some TV from mid-2000s. It's like being in a different planet. It's like being in a different planet. As I talked about earlier, we're so sanitized now.
Oh.
We're so sanitized now that anything that's remotely edgy, anything, it's all getting pounced on. It's all getting cancelled. We've been speaking about words. We haven't said half of the stuff that we could say.
No, we can't, because like you said, we would get deplatformed. We couldn't, and people would pounce all over us. And it's such a strange thing, because when I get up from this computer and I leave this room that I'm in and the Robservatory and walk into the house and hang out with my dogs or Elizabeth, none of this matters. It has no bearing on my life. I don't know what people are saying on Twitter. I don't know what people are saying on Facebook, whatever. And if I never turned on social media again, I would never know. And yet it spills over into that real world. As soon as my experience of all of this if it starts to spill over into my other experience of life, I'm out. Like, I don't need this that much. You know, it's I do this because I like interacting with people like yourself. We met, we've done this show, and we are able to express ourselves and our shared love of something. We might be different kinds of people, but I certainly think if we ever got together face to face, we'd have a great time.
Of course we would.
You know, and I think that about most people. You know, I think if I was able to sit down with Joe Rogan or even somebody like Ben Shapiro, who has a keen mind, and whether you believe in him or agree with him or not, he's clearly absolutely a clearly well-educated person. And I found, like, you know, when we were growing up, when I was a kid, we had counterculture. We had very politically incorrect things. We had underground comics, like the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers or something, and things that nowadays people would be like, I can't believe you read that. Well, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I listen to punk rock? Why wouldn't I listen to different kinds of music? Why would and I feel like even something like, you know, when we've had things that used to be more counterculture, they've been sanitized, and like RuPaul's Drag Race, which I actually really like. Who would have thought like 30 years ago people would have had a problem with that kind of thing? Now it's gone mainstream, as long as it's the sanitized version of that. You know, I've been to really bawdy, very politically incorrect drag shows. Can't have that anymore. Now it's TV series. Now Middle America is watching. And it's just amazing to me, like you said, that our individualism and what makes people rough around the edges and really interesting, the Hunter S. Thompsons of the world, the gonzo journalist, you know, gone.
Hemingway,
gone. You know, and it's nowadays everything is so sanitized, but that's not what, you know, life is meant to be like a great bottle of wine. Sometimes you drink too much of it, or maybe you have 2 or 3 bottles of wine when you shouldn't, but that's what makes you live, man.
But I think there's been a paradigm shift, because once upon a time we used to celebrate our commonalities,
right?
What brought us together, and now everyone seems to be focused on what drives us apart, and they've lost that. Instead of looking for where you can engage somebody, they're looking very specifically for where they can attack, push away, victimize somebody. And we've lost that. My real life friends, we're all very different. People. Very, very different people indeed. We have stuff that we like together, though, and that's what brings us together. So, you know, we get on a personable level. You know, we have personalities that mesh. We're all different personalities, but we have personalities that either complement or we like. You know, we gravitate towards. But they're very different people to me. They like loads of different stuff that I would never even bother. They watch TV shows I wouldn't be seen dead to watch. And I'm sure the same with myself. One of my friends always used to say to me, and this is the same with we go out for drinks. And this is not an insight. He said, "Are you watching your gay shows? Are you having one of your gay drinks?" You know, and that was just it was a funny thing, because of the shows that I liked. Like, I'll go off and watch my Smallville and stuff like that. And they'll be like, "Oh, are you watching your gay shows again?" And that we'll go out for drinks, and they'll be like, "I'll have a pint of beer," and I go, "Have a rum and coke, please." You know, and they're like, "Oh, you want your gay drink?" So it's an element that we're different on, that we're using humor to bring ourselves together still. Where's that gone?
Oh, you can't. You have to use words in a certain context, or it's disrespectful. And look, I understand that there is that normalizing all of this stuff. If people are going to point that out to you, I get that we want to be polite and all of that. But where does it end? Eventually, you know, part of part of how you employ language in things like satire and storytelling and all of that, when people make up slang words and things, they can all be misconstrued as being like, I don't think anybody, for the most part, is, once you get everybody together, you get a group of people together, we understand if somebody uses a word that might be relatively offensive, we understand whether or not the person
that we're saying, are you having a homosexual drink? Is your drink homosexual?
Yeah.
Is your television show homosexual? No. Are they having a go at homosexuals? No.
Well, that's right. And I'll tell you,
context matters, and there's no context anymore.
Well, it's like getting around, people of whatever group you want, whether, and they use their own terminology, the same way that say rap has reclaimed a certain racial epithet and uses it all the time. When you get around people, we all understand each other. We all understand our friends. And we know I have a pretty dark, sardonic sense of humor. And I'll say some things that are pretty off color. And Elizabeth will say, you can't say that around people. And I'm like, I'm only saying it around you because then you go, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. Exactly. I'm eliciting something, yes. a laugh out of you because she understands me and knows me. She knows
or
I don't.
The shock element or to get the rise, to get the.
Exactly. Yes.
I used to do it with an ex-girlfriend myself. We used to say horrendous stuff to each other.
Well, yeah, and it's like, there are games like Cards Against Humanity, which sort of prides itself on that. And it's sort of outlets, but we can't even do that anymore. I mean, no. It's there are jokes that people think, oh, that's beyond the pale. And I'm like, really? I don't think really any jokes. I think the more horrible jokes you can tell, the more horribly offensive jokes you can tell, there's something cathartic about it. And people have to understand you're not unless you are. If you really are going after a group of people, it's readily apparent.
Yes.
And I think it's very obvious. Like sometimes I talk about being raised Jewish and being meeting people that suffered through the Holocaust. I mean, I have told horrible jokes about that. And I've nobody tells better Holocaust jokes than Jews do, because you have to have a darkly sardonic sense of humor. The people who survived being in concentration camps, I can only imagine, the kind of it's, of course it was horrible, but I mean, we as human beings cope with the horrors of this universe through our dark senses of humor, because at some point you have to have that dark sense of humor, otherwise you would go mad.
Yeah, it's a cathartic release. I mean, we all have a dark side, whether we choose to show it or not show it. We all have a dark side. We have dark thoughts. We have thoughts that we can rationalize and say, I wouldn't, as a rational human being, I wouldn't even go there. But you can still have the thought. The thought still goes into your mind. You can still have those elements to it. Doesn't make you a bad person.
But that's also
it's a part of your psyche. It's a part of your makeup.
It's a part of your individualism.
Yes.
And I think that even though those may be undesirable qualities, we need those qualities. They're part of us as well. It's like when Captain Kirk says in Star Trek V, he needs his pain. He doesn't want pain scrubbed away from him. It's his pain that helps him understand the rest of life. And that's why I've never really understood the idea where we now seem as a culture, we're obsessed with these safe spaces, or being in a place where intellectually we're not challenged, where God forbid you come up with an idea. Somebody says a word that upsets you and makes you so angry that you can't, I'm a child of trauma, so I can't handle that. Life is trauma. And whatever trauma you suffered, man, I guarantee you there's worse trauma. And I don't want to get into the trauma Olympics, but
but that's just it's the arrogance of thinking your trauma, your life is above somebody else's.
Well, and that's what's so strange, the oppression Olympics.
Yes.
And let's talk about who's being oppressed. And it's terrifying to me that are starting to normalize that. Normalize the idea that we are allowing some people to say, well, my oppression now gives me the right to come after your privilege.
Yes.
And depending on where you have grown up in the world or what your skin color is. And it's, I mean, now, what is it? Robin DiAngelo's book about white fragility and white privilege. I mean, I was not born into a world where I was immediately a racist as I emerged from the womb.
But these are made up terminologies. These are made up modern day terminologies. These are not existing terminologies that have lasted through hundreds of years. This is somebody seeing the lay of the land, seeing the rise of identity politics, seeing the rise of cancel culture, seeing the rise of victimhood, people thriving off being a victim. I want to say what I want to say, but I can't say it.
Well, I mean, but also it's like the idea ultimately is about going after other people.
But it's not using your victimhood to victimize somebody.
That's exactly you. And I've always said on my channel, you can't trade one oppression for another. But what's really bothersome to me about all of this is, what are they building? You know, what are they offering? Like one of the things that really disturbed me about 9/11 is there are very valid reasons to say that America has exploited the Middle East. We needed oil. We have been unfair. We propped up people like the Shah of Iran. I mean, America does not have a great track record in the Middle East. So there are legitimate...
The Middle East has been a political tool for many countries.
Absolutely. But there are people that can have grievances. But here's the thing. Does taking out the Twin Towers, is that what you have to offer? You know, nobody said we're going to burn it all down and build something else in its place. No, we're just going to burn it all down. And I grew up in a world where I always felt that there were people that wanted to build, that wanted to create. And the people I admired, whether it was making movies or television shows, whether, say, comic books or video games, everybody was using technology and their intelligence and their creativity to make things that didn't exist before, to create the human, or add to the human tapestry of what our intellectual abilities can provide. And that's what I thought, to me, that's what the future represents. And now I feel that I'm living in a culture that not only doesn't respect the Western civilization that we have, because they're too wrapped up in the oppression that occurred while it was being created, and this idea that, yep, let's just burn it all down and start over. Let's just get rid of it all, because we're all worthless.
Where do you start from?
What's that?
Where do you start from? Where's your start point?
My start point for which? For all of this?
No, not you. Sorry, when I say you, I'm not speaking about you. I'm speaking about the people that want to tear it all down, want the Great Reset, want the New World Order. Where's your start point?
Well,
and who comes along for the ride? Because it ain't gonna be what you think it's gonna be.
Well, and the funny part about that is, like, let's say you have your Great Reset and you've got your 100 followers. They're going to need a place to sleep. They're going to need hot and cold running water. They're going to need bathrooms. They're going to need all of the exact same things that human...
So we have the infrastructure for that already in place.
Let's keep it.
Right. So the Great Reset isn't a reset. It's a what?
Hey, it's getting rid of...
What are you...
Yeah. And who are you going to get rid of? The Great Reset for anybody is like, we're going to get rid of those people that disagree with us.
Oh, and where are you going to put them?
We're going to... In ovens.
In ovens.
It's already happened. It happened...
Put you in chambers, gas chambers, and ovens, and dig mass graves, and salt the earth.
There are people...
Do they not understand you are putting everything in place from 1930s Germany? Everything. Just because you trade one group of people for another group of people doesn't give you the moral high ground.
Well, we saw it in a lot of the, if you look at a lot of the clashes that are happening on American city streets, people are going armed. Why do people go armed anywhere? People will say, well, for
you don't
self-defense.
No.
Well, that's,
you don't turn up somewhere with a gun saying I'm here, I'm bringing it for self-defense. If you're taking a gun with you when you go, you're looking for trouble.
Not only that, I think the and people have always,
you're wanting trouble.
Yeah, people have always disagreed with me. I mean, when you go somewhere with an AR-15 slung over your shoulder, you go into an American city to go to a protest or whatever. If it's not your property, it's not even your town, you're hoping to use that gun. I mean, that's, and people say to me, oh, come on, Rob. I'm like, look, man, then why do you need to why would you knowingly go into a place that you have no particular interest in personally and go there knowing there's going to be a mob, knowing there's going to be an uprising of some kind? Why would you go into that area with an assault rifle?
Well, the whole thing, since the whole Floyd business, from day one, it didn't even matter if you were black or white. It didn't matter at all. We had black people killing black people in Black Lives Matter freaking riots. We had people walking around with assault rifles. We had people walking around with concealed weapons. There was more people killed in Chad in that 2-week period than national statistics would hold.
Yeah, in my hometown of Seattle, in a pretty, by the way, diverse area of the city. If you are making a legitimately peaceful stand, you're not bringing weapons with you. Look, how many times do we have to say history repeats itself? Look at Tiananmen Square, for an example. I know China don't want that ever said again. And I know Western video games that will remove it for them in their Cold War video games Activision, Treyarch, because China says, remove that. Yes, China. Well, they need that money.
Want to do business, if you want to do business, because the only way you can do business in China is by going through a Chinese company. So you want to go through Tencent? You want to go through a company like that? You better get that off your filthy game, you Western pig dog.
Well, and what's terrifying is that by capitulating to that for profit, and let's face it, it's all about money. It comes back down to money.
Money. Yeah.
It is, once you're willing to make that kind of a compromise, can people themselves be far behind?
Well, I mean, going back to Tiananmen Square though, but you had unarmed students and tanks on the other side. One side was making a peaceful protest. The other side wasn't.
No. So this episode now that we've kind of, not really sidetracked, but going back to the whole.
But it is about all this. It incorporates all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
This is how the village has been. Because essentially, we haven't really gone off a tangent. This is what the village is. And this is how the village tries to break down the individual. I'm going to ban you on Twitter. And I'm going to keep slapping you on the wrist on Twitter, giving you bans 24 hours, 7 days now, because it's your third. Oh, by the way, I've been on Twitter since 2012. Never even received a 12-hour ban until last month. What a surprise. It's as if something happened last month. Can't put my finger on what. And since then, I've had 3. And I played a game. As soon as my first one ended out, I went and tweeted Jack and said, Jack, you're a see you next Tuesday. Did I get a ban? No. No. But then I used one of their naughty words and said, Jack, you're a R-word bimbo. Took a 12-hour ban again. And then this time. So they're trying to dictate your speech, how you talk, but they don't care. They don't care that some guy in Yorkshire's calling him Jack see you next Tuesday. Do you think Jack gives a toss? Do you think anyone at Twitter gives a toss? Nobody gives a toss. It's about behavioral. It's about trying to control your behavior. And this is what the Village is doing. This is one of the aspects that the Village is doing. It wants you to conform. If you want to use our platform, you must conform. If you want to fit into our society, you must conform.
And what's interesting, if you take it even further, the people that when they created Twitter, it was like, okay, we're going to create this great platform where people can speak 128 characters or something. Now it's 256, but it was all about communication. Well, human nature certainly proved that. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, because once people started really communicating, then all of a sudden, all this other speech arose. And I'm sure the idea behind Twitter was all kumbaya, like, oh my God, we're going to be able to communicate.
But it's anti-communication, though.
Well, now it's become that. But when
it always would be. How can you communicate on 149 characters? How can you communicate on 250 characters? Even on Parler, how can you communicate on 1,000 characters?
Right. But I mean, I think at first,
this is how you communicate.
True, but
you talk to somebody.
But even when I first started on Twitter, it was kind of fun. You know, you had to be witty in 100. You had to be able to throw out a witty bon mot in 128 characters or whatever, 156 characters, and it was kind of fun. But now,
human personality.
But human nature, takes over, and I look at the movement in this country. Let's defund the police. Let's get rid of our law enforcement.
I want to go back to your 128 characters.
Well, yes, but
are you a catchphrase? Are you a soundbite?
Right. Yes.
You're not. You're more than that. You're way more than that.
But I think
it's reductive.
But I think when Twitter started, there wasn't a lot of thought put into that aspect of it. It was just they thought it's because it's a tweet. It's just supposed to be a chirp. Like a bird, it's called Twitter, it's a tweet. That's all it is. It's not even supposed to. Then they realized once what they had created was monstrous.
That's because people decided to live on it.
Well, that's what happened. And I think that one of the interesting things about all of social media is they didn't understand how fascistic it would turn into one of the greatest tools of ideological fascism ever devised. More so, I mean, can you imagine if Goebbels had something like that back in 1935?
Well, he'd be a memester.
I mean, it would. Yeah, the great meme wars. And what's interesting is that's why a show like The Boys, when we had Stormfront come in, she's like, "I'm fighting the meme wars out there, Homelander. I can go get a bunch of angry people to fight meme wars for us. Let's go do that." And that was a show that really understood where we're at as people, and it's all of these things are playing into our worst, basest instincts, and it doesn't lead anywhere good.
No, because when something like Twitter gets so popular, and then now starts to become partisan, and then you add on top of it the fact that you want to control someone else's speech, plus the fact that you can't even properly communicate, well, that's not going to be a recipe for disaster, is it? Like I said, you want to talk to somebody, talk to them.
Well, what's funny about The Prisoner is, and I really felt it this time, is why did they even care why number 6 resigned? It's like today. In this world today, why do you care what I think or feel? How does it make any difference to you? And this organization, whoever it was, whatever was out there in the ether, thought that, oh, you know what? Number 6 is dangerous to us. He's walking around with all this information, and boy, he can really hurt us. Well, nowadays, the question is, why do you want to destroy my individuality? Why come after me? What do you think I'm going to do? Do you really want to limit my speech? Do you really want to hurt my livelihood? Well, the answer now is, well, yes, we do. We would like you gone. We would like to, if we could call your employers and tell them what we think, hey, your employers will fire you. And the idea is now that we've given the population tools to casually destroy people, and it's not even real. It's like it's virtual. You destroy somebody on Twitter, and suddenly it gets picked up, and forever any Google search, if you go to an employer, like in my case, if you Google my name, it shows up that, ooh, the Schmodown fired me because I made racist Nazi right-wing comments.
Oh, you did.
And that's something that shows up on the internet, even though I was disgusted by the death of a black police captain who was killed at the hands of another black man who it was armed robbery, and a former police captain, father of 5, grandfather of 10, gunned down on a street corner. And my whole point was
defending his friend's business.
Yes, and where was any of the other Second Amendment supporters there to help him? And that was my outrage that was misunderstood, and yet my whole I lost a thing that I was doing, that I've been doing for years, by the way, and suddenly all these people that I knew turned on me without even. I mean, I've had my channel. I think my opinions are very out there, and yet. Within seconds, luckily I was able to survive all of that, but seconds, things were changed for me. There were people that came after me that wanted to hurt me, hurt my family, hurt my professional life, hurt my entire existence on this planet because of one tweet that they perceived as being something that they didn't understand, first of all. But that's amazing.
Well, it was disgusting. We've had a conversation off cameras about, and I've let my disgust know.
No, but I mean, now the prisoner. This show is about that very thing,
what I was going to say was there's a great episode of Doctor Who, Peter Capaldi, and he's talking about 2 warring factions, the human. And he says this whole game of war, it's not a joke. And then he says, but when it's all over, when they've been defeated, what happens to the people like you? So you get rid of all the people from your platform. You stick them in ovens and you get rid of them all. What happens to them? It starts all over again. A new target is found. A new target is victimized. It's hypocrisy at its highest esteem. And control and power. What control and power? You can't ever control this. What goes on in here, you will never be able to control it. You can tell me not to say this word and that word. You can tell me to wear this shirt and these trousers, but you can never tell me how to think. Ever. And that's, of course, where the village fails. Because it wants you to do all of those things, but it can't do the one thing. You can't stop how people think.
No, and that's another thing. I mean, you can control all of the words people are saying all you want, but you're never going to control what they're really thinking.
Oh, it could be superficial. It could be superficial all day long. And all these people that are on Twitter now and all these people in these social networks, that are saying all the right things. I'm telling you right now, right up here, 95% of them probably are thinking completely different things.
Well, and that's what's really going on is, now people are having to watch what they say because they think something different. Are minds being changed? Is our society really progressing? Or are we doing something that's even worse? We're forcing people to be duplicitous, to be two-faced, because now they can't say they can't say what they're really thinking, which is antithetical to us progressing as a society. So being a true progressive is not trying to limit what people say. A true progressive is being able to comprehend and understand all of the different points of view that exist.
Well, yes. But you think a group of people at Twitter know how the world should be? You think a group of people at Facebook? You think a college professor who refuses to let people turn up and speak to educated to minds which need educating, which need opening, which need people to think for themselves?
Well, one of the most
one
of the most chilling moments in this episode is when number 6 is asked, "We need to hear from you. Please speak. We would love to hear." And he gets up, he leaves his throne that they've given him. He steps up on the podium and he addresses civilization. He addresses the jury. He addresses the court. And as soon as he begins to speak, they shout him down. Even though he's been given this exalted position, they don't really want to hear from him.
No.
They don't really care. And that to me is one of the most chilling moments in this episode.
Well, and it's like perfect, though. It's perfect.
It is perfect.
You think Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, you think they give a shit what you think, Robert? They don't give a fuck. You think Biden does? He's been lining his pockets for 47 years playing the game, playing the House of Cards. These people don't care. They never care about the people because throughout your whole life, has a government really been so outrageously rampant in changing things that you're just like, oh my God, the world's just never... No, it's just a gradual process. It's always a gradual process. Something comes in, something goes out. Something goes back in, something goes out. But these people don't give a rat's ass what anyone thinks. It's a soapbox, just like he had. There was a soapbox. So when the individual tries to speak, what do you get? You get, yes, yeah. Gone. Next, move on. Have you ever watched The Thick of It?
No.
Yes, Prime Minister, or Yes, Minister.
No, I know what The Thick of It is, but I've never seen it.
It is that, even though it's comedy and it's hyperbolic, it's perfect about how politics is played. Hilarious, but at the same time, kind of chilling. Because it is soulless and they don't care. It's about image for them. It's about saying the right thing, who they can get in front of. Relationship building inside. How can I advance my career? Yes, Minister. Yes, Prime Minister. Oh, my God. Even watching that back now, and that's a show from the 70s, is so funny and hilarious because it's all about we do what we do to stop the people from thinking.
Well,
we want to give the illusion of it, but we don't want to do any of it.
Well, because people thinking, if you don't have consensus and you've got 100 different points of view, it makes it harder to accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. And I think one of the things about our society that I've never understood is all of what's great in our society has come from both individuals, whether they were artists or whether they were designers or doctors or whatever, and they came across crazy advancements, whether it's penicillin or they designed something brand new, Benjamin Franklin and electricity, whatever. It was always like the individuals finding something, pursuing something, achieving something simply because they wanted to. I mean, for the most part, sure, people can see that, yeah, there's monetary implications if I discover something great, but that's not usually what drove people. What drives people is a personal interest in something for its own sake. At least I think the people that really excel, whether you're in sports, you've been driven since you were a small child to play sports and excel, and you become a professional sports person and you become famous and great at your craft, whether you're a musician or a dancer or a filmmaker or whatever. These are things that capture you for whatever reason, and you're doing them for their own sake. For the most part, these things are too hard to do for financial reward. And I think the same is true when you have a group of people, disparate people, that come together to do something, like whether it's in the arts, like let's put on a play, or let's go make this, or let's do something. And when you have people that are concentrating on doing something outside of themselves, whether it's a project, whether it's a campaign, whether it's they learn something about themselves. And I think that there's a lot of people that never learn those lessons. There's people that aren't driven by anything, so they never set out to accomplish a goal. They don't set a goal for themselves, go out to and then go out and make it happen and accomplish that. And if you're that kind of a person, at least in my experience, if you do set a goal, no matter what that is, I mean, there are people that just want to be parents. Well, that's a goal. You're creating a child, and you're shaping that individual's mind and body and literally their entire lives, as they can be a reflection of you, but you're hoping that your child goes out into the world and makes the world a better place somehow. So there's a lot of things you can do. I think now, in a way, I see less and less of that. And I think one of the things that people just think that, I guess it's because in the age of social media, everybody wants to be like an influencer or a master TikTok technician, whatever, but nobody wants to put in the time.
Wow, well, that's it. That's it. They want the gratification, but they don't want the legwork. They don't. I get it all the time. Oh, I tried YouTube. I did it for a week, and it's just like I didn't get anything. I mean, it's a graft. It's a graft, and the vast majority of people will never get anywhere. It's just a little thing. But any craft, nobody picks up a violin and is amazing at it on day one. Everything is about learning. But we're in an age of instant gratification. We have everything that we need at our fingertips, and now it's filtering into our psyche. I can order a PS5 and it'll come tomorrow. Not really. Don't think that. It's not on Amazon. It's gone. But I can order myself a TV tomorrow. But why can't I just learn the piano now? If I can order a TV, I can't. It's instant gratification. We get these little rewards, buzz rewards. We get a little thumbs up. We get a little love hearts we get these little dopamine hints. Instant gratification. And we all fall for it. I fall for it. Oh, what's the ratio on today's video? Oh, 98.8. And then 10 minutes later, I'll be like, why did 1% not like me? Why? Because that's the YouTuber, by the way. That's the life of a YouTuber. Full stop. But we have all these instant gratifications. And so when you're young and you're grown up in this age, unless you have good parenting, unless you have parents that will put you on the right path, but if you have standoff parents, even your hippie ones that have the best of intentions to let their child grow and experience in their own way, and they grow up in an age of instant gratification, they'll demand immediate gratification because it's the only way they know how to exist.
Yeah. And it's one of the things about The Prisoner is number 6's ordeal. He week after week, month after month, perhaps year after year, he never gave up. He kept at it, and he beat the system. He was able to subvert the system because the system never expected to come up against some kind of the staunch individualist that Number 6 was. The system was never a nail that resisted.
Well, I don't think he did.
Well,
when we get to the end section, I think, you know.
But up until the end of the episode, I mean, he had persevered where no one else ever had. In
his mind.
Well, yes, yeah, indeed. But I think that
that's why I think it's a breakdown of the ego.
But
because this is in his mind. I have won. I have beaten the system. I have not broken. I have not bent. And that, if I can just jump to the end to reference, because it needs to reference, that to me is how he loses. Because then the way that I interpret the ending is they're going to let him stay out there. I'm not one of these people that believe just because the hearse drove past, they're going to drag him in again. No. I saw that as the hearse saying, we don't need to be here anymore. We don't need to be here. It was the door that was the giveaway for me.
Oh, dude, I was about to say the sound effect on the door to his house.
It's the door opening like the village. It's like, you can be out here, but you're in our prison still.
Yeah.
That's what it was to me. So we will give you the illusion of individuality.
Well, see, my interpretation of the ending is that he did defeat the village, but that's not the real prison. The village is the real prison is the world. You know, the village is the world. So yes, and so that he might have escaped this thing, but that's like you said, the telltale sign is the sound effect when that door opens on its own and Angelo Muscat walks in and becomes his man Friday, his butler, his servant, or whatever, that he's graduated. He was at his master's level. Now he's taking the PhD course. And that's where
it's like moving from the metaphorical into the real.
Yes, and the real world is a lot worse.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of how I saw the ending is and whereas in a way he took a detour to the village, and it was almost like the entire experience in the village, it gives him the false sense of accomplishment. Oh, see, look, you know, I've become like anybody who has a cause. You know, I've become an activist and I'm going to go save the world. And they think they've accomplished some goal. And indeed, maybe they did. But
this to me is where the 2009 prisoner fails on every account, because they try and play it too literal.
Right, exactly.
And they're like, it's in your mind, but it's just like, yeah, we fucking know. It's you know, you've lost all the tact, all the artistry which made the village what it is. You know, you can, at the end of Fallout, you can look at the village as all being in his mind, or just all being in his mind as a way to deal with society and his place within society. And his own little struggles until he comes to his realization, or he understands his position, his place, or he's comfortable with his place as somebody who will remain a free spirit, who will remain true to themselves. And then that's when we go back to London, because that's when he can exist again in the reality of the world. Whereas in the 2009 prison, it's like, we're doing both these.
And also another thing is that all of us exist in our own, I mean, the world is made up, we all exist in our own little realms. We're not people, we're not citizens of the world, we're citizens of the realms that we exist in currently. Whether it's your neighborhood, whether it's your city, whether it's your level of education, whether it's your economic status. I mean, you're kind of locked into There's very few people that can flit between. What great wealth brings you, is the ability to travel wherever you want to go at a whim. And I think that's what makes, ultimately, to me at least, why I fantasize about being incredibly wealthy, is I could do anything I want. I could go finance my own movies. I could travel around the world. I could wear bespoke suits. I could buy as many Hot Toys figures as I wanted. I could have a big house. All that, and money. Like, to me, I wouldn't want necessarily power over other people, but great wealth would bring me the power to be able to do whatever I want. And what I would want to do most of all would be to make movies, to create things that cost a lot of money. And those are the kinds of things that I would be really interested in doing. And that's what I really am hoping that that's why you'd want. Yeah, I don't know why is my garage door open all of a sudden? While we're doing this show, I guess the dogs escaped from their own village.
My God!
As I'm live on our final episode here, Gilbert and Tallulah.
We're getting a literal interpretation of what is going on.
Well, they've escaped apparently their village, and they would like, as Gilbert would like, he wants. See, look at this. I guess that was on cue. So here we go. Watch. Since you're going to come up. There you go.
Boy, good boy.
Yes.
Hello.
Gilbert and Tallulah are here.
Hi.
Wow, they love their cookies.
They are beautiful.
Yes, they're lovely dogs that are very demanding. Is that enough cookies for you? So
it's never enough cookies for a dog.
Okay, you get one more each, and then you have to go. Okay, one more for you, and one more for you.
Good Josh.
So there you go, everybody. Gilbert and Tallulah, the gruesome twosome,
That's
dynamic
duo. That's an agra.
So yes, I know.
Gilbert and Tallulah.
Gilbert and Tallulah. Tallulah, her paws spread.
Yeah, her arms are wide open. Her arms unfurled.
Right? Isn't that what you are? Yes.
Sorry, I'm such an animal lover.
You would love these dogs. You would love them.
I do already. I do already, just by their brief appearance.
I used to let them on the show all the time, but then people would complain that they would bark.
Oh.
And to lunatic is what we call her.
To lunatic.
Right? Isn't that right?
Yo. Yes.
So yes, don't start barking, please.
And they're talking to you.
There's your intro. Oh, Tallulah is one of the most loquacious dogs. She sings a song that we call the annoying song. The annoying song. She's singing the annoying song. And Gilbert.
Yeah. There you go.
Where were we?
Well, we were talking about the prisoner.
The prisoner. Yes, number 6.
Yeah. We're talking about how he. Well, I was mentioning about the 2009 prisoner where it made a mistake. Of course, it was instead of it tried to play both sides of the coin and failed miserably because of it.
Right.
Being in the mind and being the reality. So as we were just speaking about his reintegration into society. Being
I think you know this idea "it's all in your mind" has become a cliche since The Prisoner. I mean, a lot of these things now everybody does it and thinks it's profound. I mean, sometimes it works, like with Fight Club. You know, I thought Fight Club worked with the Tyler Durden being in a figment of his imagination and all of that. But now it has become a cliche. And but back then, you know, it really hadn't, and I think that was, and it's done in such a way where it's very compelling. It's very, very interesting the way it is done. So, yeah.
So we had his speech being shot down because he thought he could speak to society, but society didn't give a shite about what he wanted to hear.
No. Now, I have a question. We've got there's been a lot of super chats coming in. And there is
1 hour 40 minutes in.
I know. I was just going to say, because one of them was really, I like this. This is JM, sends in a super chat and says, I feel this episode was a kludged finish. Then when I listened to the normal intro where number 6 asks number 2, who is number 1, and I realized he answers him, my faith was restored a little if it wasn't entirely random. You know, people have said that a lot. Who is number 1? You. I mean, people say that all the time, but I've never bought that because I don't think that's what they were saying.
Yeah, with some people, I've heard you are number 6.
Right.
But I'm like, there's no comma though. There's no comma. There's no break. I don't subscribe to the theory that they're telling them at all. I subscribe to the theory that even McGoohan wasn't too sure about how things were gonna pan out, but I don't think he was dropping that in. Believe it or not, at the time when The Prisoner was out, most people thought Angelo Muscat was number 1, the butler.
Right. People said that too.
That was the popular opinion.
Eric O'Sullivan sends in a very generous super chat. Thank you, Eric O'Sullivan. He says, my theory, McGoohan raised Irish Catholic. The triune God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. 2 + 4 + 6 = 1. They're the same person. Connor late 20s, McGoohan late 30s, Leo late 40s. Like the Sphinx riddle, he was, is, and could be. Also, id, ego, and the superego.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's what I subscribe to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right about that. The Law sends in a super chat and says, well done on the series. What TV series is next?
The Prisoner.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the miniseries. Although, should we do one show on that, or do we do, because it's kind of all one story, or I don't know if we do 6 more episodes.
Well, I mean, we can ask the audience and see what they say.
Yeah, I think that would be it. Mr. Tickle Trunk sends in a super chat. Mr. Tickle Trunk sends in another one and says, I've been a teetotaler my whole life. Is this episode what an acid trip is like? We hit it, and my brain is inside out and melting potatoes. I taste color.
Yeah, as somebody who's been on multiple trips in his life. Yeah, I mean, it's to describe as a trip isn't too far off. But a trip is a trip. Oh, yeah, I'm not advocating drug use. But a trip is a very personal thing because you take your trip where you want to go. You ride it. So when you are tripping, you latch on and you ride that trip. You can go to fucking beautiful places. You can go to incredible places. You can see some weird ass shit. But when you come out of it, you're sort of, whoa. That's wow. Yeah, I'll never forget, because when I had my first trip, I was like panicking when I was tripping because it's my first trip, and I didn't. And then I just relaxed. I relaxed and
let it flow over you.
And then wow, that's when it happened.
Because what's flowing over you is you. You're experiencing yourself.
Yes.
A waking dream somehow, brought forth into your conscious mind, and you have to allow it to happen. If you fight against it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Rob Altus says, I wonder if Lost tried to capture an ending like this but failed, in my opinion.
All right, can you just say that again?
Rob Altus says, I wonder if Lost tried to capture an ending like this but failed, in my opinion. See, my problem with Lost was the show asked one question: what is the island? What is it? And they never really answered that question, and I don't think anybody ever knew. And I think
JJ hadn't got a clue.
And I always thought, even I'm not a religious person, what I would have liked, what I saw the island as being, again, it was a crucible. That maybe the island was the last remnants of God's creation of the universe, and whoever found their way there, if they survived being on the island, they were able to go out into the world, and they would be toughened up in a way that only the island could have done, and their experience would have allowed that person to add to the greater experience of humanity somehow. So if you were, to me, the island was a privilege. It was a way of experiencing maybe the creator of all things without saying that. That's what I thought they were doing. And then when they said nothing, and the seventh season or the sixth season became just a bunch of gobbledygook. Because when you had John Locke, when you had Terry O'Quinn fighting Matthew Fox, and you had sort of science versus faith, that to me was very interesting. And then they got rid of that. Terry O'Quinn's dead. Now let's make him the smoke monster. Whatever. And none of that made a lick of sense. And it was unfortunate. Whereas I think that The Prisoner, as much as it might get ambiguous or surreal at the end, it still stayed on point. You know, it never drifts away.
In modern day, you want a good sci-fi show about faith and faith versus science? Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, absolutely. And in that in that show, God or some supreme being actually exists.
Yes.
You know, you know that character is not seen, but the effects of that character and his emissaries or her emissaries or its emissaries are there the whole time. And then there's actual intervention. I mean, he's able to conjure up a viper at one point and bring back a dead Cara Thrace as whatever she is. And I love that about the new modern Battlestar Galactica. I think that was a ballsy way to go.
In a particularly at the time, and in a society, we're living in a society, but in a society where the usual pathway to go down is the non-theological one,
right?
Is the deity doesn't exist. We are alone. It was. I can't even think of another show where God exists.
Well, that yes, and I've always found that to be interesting because, to me, whether or not you're a believer or a person of faith, I feel that if you can imagine things, it's very compelling to me. I've always been attracted to stories about gods and religion and things like that, and I love the idea that if the supreme being exists, how would they interact with the real world? You know, and Battlestar Galactica is a way that clearly this has all happened before and it will all happen again. Whatever this design is, and the fact that God is an active participant. I loved that. I thought it was great.
Well, they're kind of almost a Loki. They're watching. They kind of get involved, you know, from time to time.
The angels, you know, his emissaries. Yeah.
But I think, what I think was a great thing about it is it shows that faith doesn't have a theological or scientific background basis. Faith is faith,
right?
Regardless of where you sit on the fence. And so, if you haven't seen that 2004 to 2008 Battlestar Galactica series, check it out. It's so good.
It's so good. And I did love that. So Kevin Harris sends in a super chat and says, I believe that the island folks are clones and replicants used to determine their real counterparts' true intentions. Eventually, the replicants took the island. I guess this is Lost. The end, they're all just dolls run amok. Or do you mean the island meaning the village? No, I don't know. You know what I do love? I love the fact, and it made me chuckle. Elizabeth was watching this with me, shaking her head the whole time, going, "What the hell is going on in this episode?" I love when all of the different multicolored helicopters are taking off. Like we've seen and now there's tons
of them just coming up from various almost like the Kansas nuclear, facilities. They were just spouting up from all the little secret bases on the island, all the little secret bases that are around the place, just all these different types of stock footage helicopters, and the same helicopter taken off a million times to make it look like they had tons of them. But it's a proper evacuation of the village going
on. Wow. I love it. And then the rocket, of course. Where's it going? Where's the rocket going?
It's the only way's up, baby.
the only way's up. Rob Altus says, I cannot get dem bones out of my head.
Dem bones gonna walk around. Dem bones gonna walk around.
200 Watt Studios sends in a super chat and says, "This is why homicide cops have a dark sense of humor. It helps you cope with the horror."
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism. Yeah.
Absolutely. Manowar 665, neighbor of the beast, sends in a super chat and says, "McGoohan, OG subverter of expectations. Number one is societal expectations and a middle finger to typecasting. Oh, and Robert, don't tell Az. He will see the super chat as an infidelity." Infidelity. Mr. Tickle Trunk.
Spread the love is what I say.
Yeah, why not? Mr. Tickle Trunk goes on to say, "Your talk about dark humor was so very important. My family are Hungarian and Polish refugees. They coped seeing starvation and death under socialism with humor. I got almost venta-black humor from them, from their love. It's a mechanism for healing. Don't ever lose it."
Yeah. And also, don't ever get into a competition about who's got the best tattoo.
No. Do you have a tattoo?
I do have a tattoo.
Only
I have
one
tattoo here.
I do not.
And it is the bat symbol.
Oh, that's cool. Which bat symbol?
The orange background bat symbol.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, bro.
Tomer Crits, subscribe to the channel. Thank you, Tomer. Mark C, by the way, Mark Chure is his own. My channel has an official toxic fan. I don't know if you know that. I have official people that and Mark C, he told me he is a self-described toxic fan. He's really not, but I've decided to be
lovely.
because when he called himself a toxic fan, but he actually isn't. He brings a lot of great discourse to the channel. Mark C says, "My thoughts on the prisoner's allegory. Capitol Hill is the village. Trump was number 6, and now Biden number 2. Oh, and now Biden. Number 2 will make sure anyone who's number 6 is infested with individualism will now be brought back in line to control of the village."
Oh my God.
That's kind of interesting. I like, see, I'll tell you. That's very interesting. What do you think about that?
Number 6 has to go around sniffing people.
Capitol Hill is the village. Trump was number 6, and now Biden. Number 2 will make sure anyone number 6 infested with individualism will now be brought back in line to control of the village. Huh.
Well, number 2 wants everything controlled. It's a stretch for me.
Yeah, but I kind of like the idea.
Yeah. There is. I think when you get uber specific, then it kind of loses a little bit. Generalizing, sure.
Yeah.
But uber specific, I'm not too sure. But number 6 wasn't infesting people with his individualism, though. He after checkmate, he essentially gave up on the rest of the village.
Right. Yeah.
So he was very much a one-man band until, well, I mean, that's where his victory ended up being. And until he decided to fight himself. He'd fought all the demons of society. Now it's time to fight himself and see what kind of metal of a man he was.
Yeah. Raygun Media Productions. That is our man Jason Spriggs, who's done our overlays for these shows. We've got to give him mad props. A great shout out to him.
This one is incredible this week.
It's cool, isn't it?
The colors are phenomenal. Number 6 with that great smile. Liam McCurn on the right hand side. Judge, the masses. Just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic, this one.
He says, do we think there's any deep meaning or symbolism in number 6 talking to the cop at the end as Angelo watches on, silently waiting? Yeah, you know what? That was something that was, I took it as that this is how I saw it. I really do believe number 6 is like, you got to go after that man, meaning number 2, because he's pointing in the direction that number 2 went, like over to Parliament or wherever that is. Like, it's, you've got to.
I thought he's explaining the village.
Yes, that too.
I was taken, and then I was kidnapped in the village, and then all this stuff went on, and then I defeated them, and then we got into a rocket, and then that's when he jumps up because he's doing the rocket taking off. So I think he's trying to tell the policeman about the village.
But I also think that he's like, you got to go get that dude.
No, McCoon's rehabilitated now. He's now a good man again.
Oh no, absolutely. But maybe, I don't know, somewhere over there, the system where he came from. Number 6.
Village. He's over there. He's 27 miles away from London.
I love that, by the way. I love when you see McGoohan jumping around like a schoolboy, trying to tell a Bobby. He's a Bobby, right? You'd call him a Bobby. I love that.
To me, the best image was you had McGoohan on the street corner, and then you had Angelo Muscat deep, and then the policeman went past and went into the middle of them and was looking. And it was just such a brilliantly framed shot.
Well, also because Angelo's also big in the frame, so he looms over them. He's not diminutive anymore.
Yeah.
He's he's the one that I always thought that
he's the number one.
Rob Altus says, did the butler did not have a number, or did I miss it?
No, the butler did not have.
He did not have a number. The butler comes to serve. And Aunt Brierly sent in a super chat. Thank you, Aunt Brierly. I appreciate that. So that is the end of our super chat portion of the show, unless people send them in. Thank you very much for all the support. This has been great. So I think like to a summation of this again, going through this show and going through Fallout. Does this show have anything? Is it just a show, or in watching it again, do you feel that this could influence you to do something different in your life?
Oh, that's a great question. I think this show is a great way to shine the light on you. I think it's a great way to shine the light and say, who are you? Who are you? What makes you up? How do you want to fit into society? Do you want to be a cog? Do you want to be ambitious? Do you want to, Leo McKern, this was a person who said, I had the ear of kings. And so it didn't, I knew it wouldn't be long until somebody like you would come a knocking, and I'd wake up one day to find myself here. Is that where you want to be? Because then Liam McCurn resisted for a very short time and relished the role of number 2. Relished it. Because it was ego. It was vanity. It was the illusion of power. It was multiple different things. To me, it's a great way. I think if you want to reduce it, I think it's a great way to say, you can be something. Regardless of how many voices are out there against you, shouting you down, saying that they want you to be this, that, and the other, you can choose to say, I want to be who I want to be. And that is the biggest power. It's the control over yourself. And so, yeah, I think there is a very uplifting and beneficial, self-beneficial moral message, whatever you want to call it, with this series as a whole. Because at the end, ultimately, he gets out.
I mean, I do find it uplifting. I think it's an uplifting message. The Law sends in a super chat and says, well done on this series. What TV series is next?
The Prisoner.
The Prisoner, yes. We're going to continue on. Why not? And do the 2009 miniseries. Man of War 665. The neighbor.
Hold the fort for 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm holding the fort for 2 minutes. I will go to Man of War 665, the neighbor of the beast, sent in a super chat and says, thank you, by the way. Once again, thanks to the both of you for this series. Well, it's certainly been, you know, the thing that I've found interesting about going back and watching shows, like I first saw this like with Az when I was much younger. I think I saw it when it was on PBS. I want to say, I've never actually looked up the date, but I want to say I was 12 or 13, and this was a show that I had seen in the pages of Starlog. I had read about it in the wake of Star Wars coming out. There was a lot of science fiction film books like Alan Frank's Sci-Fi Now, which was full of things I had never seen before, and the Science Fiction Encyclopedia touched on this show, and it was something that I had wanted to see when I was a kid, and finally I got to see it, and it puzzled me, to be honest. Some of the episodes I really understood, I really got, but then when I got to like Living in Harmony or The Girl Who Was Deaf, I didn't dig it as much as I wanted to, and I felt kind of the show let me down. I felt the surreal episodes, and I felt this was sort of a staple of late 60s science fiction television from the UK, because my beloved UFO, which ran 26 episodes, also had weird surreal episodes like Time Lash and things like that. And I understand on one hand it was a production thing, and then also they were trying to make larger points. And sometimes I didn't quite understand them, and then as I bought this show, I owned Laserdiscs. I've owned it on DVD, and now I own it on Blu-ray. I don't know if they're ever going to release a 4K version of it. I guess I'll probably have to get that too. But the Blu-rays are incredible, the new remasters. But it was great to revisit this show with Az and looking back at it from the perspective that I'm at now in my life. Because I probably haven't, like I watched a couple of these discs when I bought them, but I didn't go through the entire series. And it's always great when you own something and you can go back and look at it. I mean, I sometimes feel that I should go back and rewatch every movie I've ever seen every 10 years and see how they hit me, see how they come back, and do I feel differently about them? Have I learned? Have I grown? Am I in a place in my life where they don't mean as much as they used to when I was a kid? You know, I never really know. Mark C. sent in another super chat and says, oh, bad comma placement. Biden is number 2. And of course, now that number 2 is consoling the village again, the village itself and society can heal from number 6's individualism. Welcome to the village. You know, it's funny. My only problem with all of that is if you look at John Drake, if you think about as a secret agent, was a fairly successful secret agent. Donald Trump was not over the course of his life. And remember, he was a fixture in 80s America. I read Art of the Deal. You know, his first wife, Ivanka. As Mark C. said, bad comma placement. Biden is number 2. And of course, now that number 2 is consoling the village again, the village itself and society can heal from number 6's, meaning Trump's individualism. Trump being the ultimate individual. Welcome to the village. And my answer to that, I was in the middle of, I just want to say that, you know, John Drake was a very successful secret agent. He was shown at being very good at his job. He was very capable. Whereas a person like Donald Trump, and I said he was a fixture in America, in American pop culture since, you know, the 80s. And that's when the book, The Art of the Deal, came out. His first wife, Ivana Trump. Ivanka's his daughter. Ivana Trump was big. Then Marla Maples was big. So we had over 30 years of Donald Trump in the public eye, and he's had spectacular failures, a lot of business failures that were very... I
can't believe Trump stakes.
I mean, all kinds of things. And so it's not like Trump was this innovative, really successful guy. What he had was celebrity. I think what happened was when he came back and had The Apprentice and he was shown as firing people, he gained a mythology around him that I think was not necessarily deserved. However, it did, as all Americans love, he reinvented himself from going from being a businessman to coming and being an entertainer and even dominating the ratings on the airwaves and then interacting with other celebrities. which put him in a very different place than he had. If he was just the entrepreneur that he was, I don't know if he would have been elected president. But because in American fashion, like Reagan before him, he became an entertainment figure that became, and again, he became a figure that I think a lot of people wanted to be, to be on television and work with celebrities and fire them and be rich and all that. And I think that was a big part of his appeal. And that is something that I don't necessarily think Trump was a strong individualist. I mean, he is for himself, obviously.
I think Trump's, I think his main strength was his ability to talk to the common man.
Yep, absolutely. 100%.
Politicians can't because they don't know how to and they don't care. So I when I watched the Biden-Trump debate, I found it fascinating because when Trump was talking, I felt this is a person talking to me.
Right.
And when I heard Biden talking, the political speak, the whole demeanor, the pandering at times, and it was just he came across as politician man. And I think that's why he won the election ultimately back in 2016, is because he was being able to communicate to people who were sick and tired of having politics speak.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. But the funny thing is that Trump came from a very, very wealthy family when he was born. He was a person
he can still communicate to the common man.
Well, yes, and I think that is something that cannot be emphasized enough. And one thing about him is he spoke from the hip. He was going off teleprompter. He didn't like how he would say whatever's on it. He had really no fucks to give. And I think that there was something very appealing about that to his base.
It's very refreshing. It's very refreshing when you're constantly used to politicians speaking in such a controlled, middle of the road way. Well, I absolutely agree with your point there, but what we have to take, it's always like half answers. Yes or no. Well, I want to answer it like this. No, yes or no. So people were sick and tired, and then you had a man come along that just went, yeah, and this is why. You had something completely different, completely refreshing that people could relate to, could understand, and that wound a lot of people up the wrong way, because the people who they were talking to were the businessmen, were big business, were the people who put in the money into their purses, were the people who are saying, look, we're going to protect your taxes, we're going to protect your businesses, we're going to make sure that you don't pay much on your Amazons and all those companies are paying fuck all tax. Fuck all, nothing.
Right.
While the everyday man, and they're being protected, while the everyday man is paying fucking through the nose in taxes and then being told, oh, you need to pay more.
No, I think that's absolutely. And another problem with the world, I mean, we have first world countries, second world countries, third world countries. We have people that are living on $1 a day, if that. That are living right next door to people. I saw graphic depictions of this when I was in Bulgaria 12 years ago working on a film. You would see there was a lot of brand new Russian money, oil money flowing into Bulgaria, and you'd see somebody in a brand new Lamborghini driving down the road right next to a horse-drawn cart that a Romani or forgive me, but a gypsy person their family would. It was crazy, the kind of disparity, but it wasn't just disparity. It was seeing first world and third world, and we talked about that with that episode about people existing. I asked, was there gypsy culture in England, and you straightened me up on that, and it was just interesting to see that kind of thing. Well, America is like that as well. We have all kinds of. If you came from a manufacturing town that's been there for generations, and you've had families who have had 5, 6, 7 generations of members who have been in a manufacturing family, and then suddenly our manufacturing is taken away and shipped overseas. No one's come to your town to help you. It's you're left to fend for yourself. And I think that's one of the things that the problems that, say, the Democrats have is they don't know how to talk to people like that. People who are asking questions, where am I going to be? Where are my kids going to be? And what are you going to do for me?
Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's and that's what we're like 20 different countries in one here in the United States.
Particularly at the present moment in time where businesses are shutting down. I live in a little village. Pretty much every shop, person-owned shop is gone now. We've got the supermarket and we've got the charity shop.
Will they come back, do you think?
Oh, they're up for let. They're empty. They're vacated. No, they're not coming back. And, businesses are falling down left, right, and center. People losing their jobs left, right, and center. Debenhams is on the verge of collapse here in the UK, which has other retail houses, Burton and things like this that we've had for decades upon decades. There's another 3,300 jobs. Who's making all the money? Amazon, Google. Yeah, they're the ones who are making all the money out of this. Big business is now suddenly got no competition.
Yeah, that's a little dismaying.
So who's gonna where are the handouts? Where we're gonna do zero interest business loans to get you set up. Where are they? I bet you they never happen. They'll never come.
Well, I mean, we can't even get our government to agree on stimulus checks for people.
It's because everyone's got their hand out at the moment.
Where are we going to be then? And look at right now, the pandemic is now raging across America the way it's never done before.
Well, is it?
Yeah. Oh, it's bad. Here in California, terrible.
Well, I mean, you're being told.
Well, yes.
We're being told that our hospitals are overflowing. We're being told that our test centers are can't cope. And we're having people driving around and test centers are empty and hospitals are empty. And there's no evidence of this that they say is happening. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I think, obviously I do think that COVID is legit and real. But to the scale and scope, I'm a believer that I still attest to the fact that protect the weak. Protect your elderly, protect your at risk, but let people who are fit and healthy get on with life. Because the way that we're going at the moment, we will not have an economy to go back to.
Well, that's the real terrifying part of it all. That's the terrifying part.
Then what do you do? We just start. You can't buy shit from Amazon when you don't have a job. You wait. Where are you going to sell? Who are you going to sell houses to when they haven't got money to buy?
Well, that's the thing that I've never understood about income inequality and all this. You can't. The foundation of our society is the people in it, and the 1%. This income inequality. Eventually, the foundation will crumble and fall, and then what happens? And even the 1%.
This is the class war. You are going to create a poverty class. That's what you're doing. This is what's happening right now. And you are letting able-bodied, fit young people not work. We've been locked away for a month. It's been criminal that we have. Criminal.
Well, they started.
There's no reason why we should.
Another lockdown here in LA on Monday. This past Monday, it's the last 2 days. And, it was, we've essentially been locked down since March.
Same here.
And it's crazy. By the way, Mr. Tickletrunk sends in another tip. Thank you, sir. I'm actually sad that this series is over. Your duo has such great chemistry. You really need to set up some kind of regular show you can just knock out for an hour once a week. I say that even though I want many Joe Rogan-length podcasts from you two.
I got a feeling Rob and I could talk the earth barren if we were to let go. There are certain people that you feel that you could just talk to. I feel you get Gary and I together, we can talk to the cows come home.
Yeah.
I feel it the same with yourself. So
well, I think I think real fans. I've found, and I don't mean to say that there are fake fans and real fans, but I mean when I talk about real fans, I mean people that have grown up with this stuff their whole lives, and as you get older, I think when real fans get together, OG fans that have had this stuff coursing through their veins for most of their lives, we never run out of things to talk about, like ever. That's why you can go to a science fiction convention and wind up in a conversation that lasts 12 hours.
Yeah, this isn't Twitter. It's just like, oh my God, I'm never gonna buy your comic again. No, you never bought it in the first place. You never bought it in the first place. You were a fake. You're a fraud. You're just there for the culling, for the cancel culture. You're just there for the dogpiling. You don't care about the characters. We could talk most things, I think.
This never happened to the other feller. Sent in a super chat and says, "Simpatico, my number 2 chair was just delivered." Oh, I would love a number 2 chair. I'd love one of those. Gentlemen, thank you for this amazing retrospective. And Mark C goes on to say, you know what? This never happened to the other fellow, which is a great reference to the opening of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So thank you for that.
This never happened to the other fellow.
So, yes. As he's holding the slipper while watching her drive away.
One of the best Bond themes by Louis Armstrong.
Oh, it's great.
We have all the time in the world just for love. Time enough for life to unfold all the precious things love has in store.
Somebody said I sounded like a Muppet when I do that, but you sound better than me. I love that song.
I spent ages as a kid listening to Louis Armstrong's inflictions during that. So when he was like, "Love has in store."
That's good, man. You nailed that. I want to see This Never Happened to the Other Fellow's number 2 chair now. Now I want to see pictures, man.
Yeah, Pixar didn't happen, dude.
Yeah, that's right. I want to see you sitting there with an umbrella. Mark C sends in a super chat and says, "It's okay. On a state level, California's terrible. You're in lockdown. Governor Newsom, no mask, no social distancing, at a $400 a plate dinner with friends. We are in the village."
That guy is Jason Bateman. He is. Patrick Bateman, not Jason Bateman.
Yeah, Patrick Bateman.
Patrick Bateman, that guy. Californian psycho.
Patrick Bateman. I love Patrick Bateman.
Oh, he's great. Well, yeah, I was going to say probably Patrick Bateman's more likable than Gavin Newsom, but okay.
Derek Shearer sends in a tip and says, "Watching the brilliant Lord of the Rings extras led me to animatronics at Weta for The Hobbit 10 years later. Thanks for that. I worked on those special features on the Lord of the Rings movies." Prisoner series brought a new appreciation for a favorite show. Thanks again. He says Derek at Derek Shearer, SCHERER.com if you'd like. 255 characters. I guess that's what you have on Twitter now. So, but thanks for the support, Derek. I appreciate that. So, again, I like, do you feel now looking back, does Fallout do the rest of the series justice?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer because I think it depends on the way that you tackle the series. If you tackle the series as a look into the individual, then I think it's pretty decent ending all in all. But if you're tuning into the show because you think you're watching John Drake escape from a village, then I think you're going to be highly disappointed by the way that the show ended. And that's the fine line though that the show trod was the fact that it was, it was putting things that people could relate to. It was having those standardized episodes, and but at the same time, it was a show about very specific themes.
Right.
And the exploration of these themes. So ultimately, the ending would have to satisfy that as opposed to the other, in my eyes. Being young, didn't like it. Being old, liked it a lot.
Oh, I feel that way too. I mean, because you're waiting for that traditional response. But I kind of, especially today, I really enjoyed watching Fallout. I mean, I really enjoyed. This is the first time that I felt it's just so interesting, and really listening, and on Blu-ray seeing like the names of the jurors and where they what part of society they come from, and they all look the same, and the detail. And I really liked the way this episode was directed. I think McGoohan does a great job.
Yeah, he's a great director.
And I really enjoyed it. And in a way, I think if it was a more traditional, like, what are you going to have? The great and powerful Oz behind a curtain be number one? Like there's really.
I think a traditional ending would have been a letdown.
Absolutely. Because
who could you honestly truly have as number one in a traditional sense?
Well, it would be somebody that probably hadn't been introduced before, and even if they were introduced, you're like, oh, that person. It still wouldn't have been satisfying.
It was nice to have a legitimate intellectual TV show as opposed to a pseudo intellectual.
Right. And I like the idea that you would never get now with network notes. I mean, one of the things that I always talk about on my own show that I always appreciate is the sense of authorship. I always feel that I did a whole stream about what I feel about modern, say, Star Trek, because we haven't talked about Star Trek enough in this episode, is that I don't feel that we're getting true authorship. We're getting, first of all, Discovery is a bastardized version of what Brian Fuller wanted. And then the creators, the writers, are not being true to Star Trek. They're recreating Star Trek in their own image. So it's not an authentic experience. And I think that all things like the Phantom Menace channels, or all fans, what we're looking for is to have the authentic experience that we used to get from our franchises when they were controlled by individuals, again, as opposed to being owned by corporations. I mean, Star Wars has now become something that was really the vision of one man and his collaborators to being a corporate-owned entity that is driving a giant economic engine across many different platforms. So the actual stories themselves have suffered. Now, I think what The Mandalorian represents is a return to authenticity. You have Dave Filoni and you have Jon Favreau, who are the two driving forces behind this show. Whether you like The Mandalorian or love The Mandalorian or not, you're still getting an authentic experience from them as authors. And one of the great things about this show is McGoohan was the driving force behind it, and this final episode, like it, love it, hate it, you get a sense of authorship. There is an authentic experience that this episode delivers to you, and that is something that I think is what we are all, as fans, looking for. We want an authentic experience through, because remember, I don't think anybody, true fans, don't just look at this stuff as like, oh, it's just another piece of entertainment. It's in one ear and out the other.
This is something special. This is different.
And the things that we love, we puzzle over them. We buy the books. We read analysis. It's something that never is never not with us. And, right back here, finding of director Alex Cox. I didn't know when we started this show, I'd never read this book, but Alex Cox, the director who made Repo Man, so he's an old school punk, wrote that about his own experience. And I think that's what we want as fans, and I think this show provides that, and it is unique. And I don't think we have enough anymore because all of this great entertainment has become so expensive to make. Not that it wasn't before, but whether it was Star Trek, whether it was like Terry Nation working on Doctor Who and Blake 7, whether it was J. Michael Straczynski's Babylon 5, whether it was Joss Whedon's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, these things that become beloved to us.
But Buffy's a great example because Buffy you can watch on a completely different level. You can just watch Buffy as a girl growing up. But you know, and the vampires are representative of the, you know, challenges in the school, the challenges that she has to overcome. You know, there's a whole kind of ethos built around that it's all about just Buffy Summers' way of coping with you know, going through high school and you know, teen, and then going into college, whatever. So there's that element, but there's you know, there's something so special about The Prisoner because it was a very specific, you know, it's a very specific idea of one man that was realized and put out there. This wasn't a we're going to start a franchise, we're going to start a universe, we're gonna have a branch off of this, that, and the other, but we want to cater this one to that demographic, and we want to cater that one. And like I said, you get sanitized and diluted and trash, ultimately. Just trash, mindless trash. You asked me to remember, you know, Discovery 2 weeks down the line. It's my brain thrown out. It's gone.
Right.
You know, it's not retaining this because even my brain understands this is shite. This is shite I don't need to hold on to. Whereas there's certain shows, Next Generation, The Prisoner, very specifically. There's others, but I don't want to go into them because we're going to do a show about something.
Yeah.
You know, but The Next Generation and The Prisoner, and those shows were so well crafted. They were so well crafted. They were so well put together. The characters, the dialogue, the themes, everything about it. They weren't trying to just make diluted television. They were legitimately wanting to say something. They were legitimately wanting to pose questions.
Absolutely. And I think that's what you want from any. I mean, the reason that we love storytelling in all of its myriad forms is because we are looking for truths about our own lives in the experiences and the thoughts of others. And I think that great storytelling really hits people on a visceral level. Everyone's got their favorite. You know, I'm of the opinion that if you have a favorite, whether it's a TV show or it's a book or if it's a movie, those characters are very real to you. You know, look
at Kirk, right? When you look at Captain Kirk, and you speak to somebody and you say give your worst about Captain Kirk. Oh, he's a womanizer. He's arrogant. You know, they'll come out with things like that. Okay, superficial insults, let's say, or superficial speculations about him, without truly understanding the character. But Star Trek never turned Kirk into a god. They never turned Kirk into the center of the universe. He was a flawed man. He was a good man, but he was a fly pussy. But he was a flawed man. My cat's coming in. But he was a flawed man, and like you said, he had his issues. He had his problems with the Klingon Empire. He needed to hold on to his hate because of his son dying. He had the everyday stuff about trying to let go, but not wanting to let go of the life, the adventures, and everything that he had. The realization that he's growing older. You know, very human. Very human. He wasn't space fucking Jesus flying around saving the universe and preaching to people about how, hi everyone, this is how you should do it. This is, you know, and then crying into, you know, Bones' fucking arms every 2 minutes while Bones hugs and cries back. These aren't relatable people.
No.
They're not people. They're mental.
Yeah, and not only that, but the idea that you've retconned a character in Spock, it's in my mind, it's very offensive that you've done that. And somebody sent me a really great letter the other day talking about how, well, what about Amanda Grayson, Spock's mother? This idea that when they say on this show, well, you know, it was because Michael Burnham was there that Spock became the man he was. No, it was because of his mother. And the people that accept, I mean, I know it's a fictional show, but part of what makes good fiction is that you believe it. You have to believe, and Star Trek Discovery is a show that I don't believe. I don't believe. I watch it and I'm like, you can't go ahead. Who are you to go back and retcon a character that you had no connection to.
A very spiteful person.
Yes, and I that's the kind of thing where you have a whole big universe, and why is it that you have to go tie these characters to, like, if they had said that Sarika Vulcan had a ward or had a student, and that student was Michael Burnham, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But the fact that they've made her Spock's adoptive sister and all of this, why?
Well, the good news is this doesn't exist to me.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It doesn't. I don't. There's nothing about Star Trek.
This will never exist to me.
Yeah. There's nothing about it that feels real. But what I find interesting is that I feel that I'm not being provided an authentic experience by Star Trek Discovery, and that's what I'm looking for. And I think the same is true of a lot of our franchises. Look, I thought the Russell Davies era of Doctor Who, while it was different, Christopher Eccleston doing his one season and then David Tennant coming on board and creating Torchwood and all that. I loved all that stuff. I thought that was, as somebody who was not a lifelong Doctor Who aficionado, I still enjoyed. I mean, I really started watching Doctor Who at the Tom Baker years, but I thought what they were doing was really interesting. It was updating a show, but it felt like it was, it had fealty to the original show. It felt like
it was respecting what came before it.
Yeah.
Discovery has no respect, and yet demands respect back.
Yes.
That's the narcissism of Hollywood. You will shit all over what millions of people love and then demand that we like the show, like they did with Picard when he sat on the fucking stage and was just like, a lot of people put a lot of hard work, so we ask that you go in and you're just like, no, your body of work will speak for itself. And to quote Picard itself, the sheer fucking hubris.
No, it's very odd as well. I mean, especially with, there's so much great science fiction and so much interesting stuff that you can draw upon. I think one of the great failings of Picard is it was so pedestrian from a point of view of Star Trek and from a point of view of science fiction and a point of view of storytelling itself.
Cerebral television is not pedestrian.
No.
Just because you might not have the either the patience for it or the acumen for it doesn't mean that there isn't an audience. There was a huge audience for it. And people liked the fact that Star Trek was cerebral. They liked the fact that it wasn't all about pew-pew and space battles. They enjoyed the politicking of the alien races and the way that we could subtly put our own society issues in there. Very subtly, never heavy hand. Well, there's sometimes black, white, white, black. But when you got into the Next Generation, it became more subtle. As opposed to TOS, which was okay.
By the way, Michael Preston sends in a super chat and says, "I started watching The Prisoner because of you two. It's quite good. And Rob, as your resident TV drug pusher, you need to buy the 77-inch OLED Sony." Not a paid endorsement. Yes, I do. I am definitely in the market for either an LG or a Sony. I'd like to get the Panasonic 77-inch OLED, but it's not being sold in the United States. But Az could get one. Pop Culture Avenger sends in a super chat and says, "Great job, Rob and Az. I'm a physical media guy. Will you be putting all of your Prisoner live streams on a DVD set to purchase?" I really enjoyed it. I never thought about that. Well, since they're available streaming for free, and we wouldn't be able to remaster, because once you put up something on YouTube, you can't back download it at full HD, which is a problem. But what are you going to do? Mr. Tickletrunk asks, "Do you think the entire show was a metaphor?"
If you wanted it to be. That's the beauty of posing questions.
Right.
You can create your own answers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you could. I don't. I mean, I want to believe that in the world, in the universe of John Drake or whatever, that the village was a real place. Just like when I watched the John Wick movies, I love the universe of the Continental Hotel and
Yeah.
all of this mumbo jumbo with coins, and here's this stamp that you got this, and you have to show it and give people. I love that world, and from something that I like, I want to believe that the village is a real place, and
Yeah. But it had to deal with, it had to deal with the things that it had to deal with, and it did it in the manner in which it did it, which was using, the surreal element to it.
Yes.
So although we didn't, like you said, sometimes you didn't get the traditional thing, I still viewed it as the further adventures of John Drake.
Yes. And to me, it was always slightly, because of the technology and the way they can control minds, and I always saw the prisoners slightly futuristic. The same way, maybe 10 years from the time it was set. So maybe just like UFO, my other favorite series from the era, UFO was set in 1980, and even though it was made in 69 to 71, I've always felt The Prisoner probably took place sometime around. It was in the future, from our future. I mean, from our present, it was in the future because of the technology on display.
Yeah, but
not very far.
Again, there was quite, you could easily say though that it was, society is always evolving.
That's true.
And so it was their way of showing the evolution of society, the evolution of where they were going was through their technology, because a lot of it was technology. And, there was you could say very much that there was the argument in there that is technology advancing quicker than humans. I mean, I could say, I think nowadays we can say we probably have progressed our technology past where we are right now.
Oh, I think absolutely, and we don't have a handle on it either.
No,
especially when it comes to biotech and what we can start with CRISPR technology and gene splicing and all that. And one day somebody's going to do something really bad. It's gonna make this pandemic look like a walk in the park, because we just don't have the ethical or the moral things in place and we should be examining all of these issues. Things like designer babies. Like, what's going to happen? Are we going to live in a Gattaca world?
Well, eugenics war.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that going to happen? And by the way, if you could improve the human species, well, shouldn't we?
Okay. All right. I'll play devil's advocate. And I've got to go soon, by the way. But I'll play devil's advocate. You say improve the species.
Yeah.
What if a country decides that they want to eradicate homosexuality?
And that is a possibility.
Because the sad fact is, whenever we have a technology, it gets abused.
Yep.
No matter how good intent, how well intentioned the technology is, somebody would abuse it. And once you get into the realms of choosing designer babies, once you get into the realms of saying, I want my child to be this or that, it's like the stupidity of that dickhead from Star Trek Discovery who said, oh, well, in the future, everyone is baseline bi.
Yeah.
Oh, so the human race is on the verge of extinction then? Because every generation we lose 50% of our that's, every generation upon generation, because they just wanted to virtue signal it. They just wanted to get, we're so progressive. That's not how sexuality works. But if you've got that technology,
well, yeah, and therein lies the rub. How are we gonna wield the great powers that we have?
You could say I'm going to play devil's advocate to the devil's advocate. You could get a progressive government in that says, oh, all new children must be born bisexual. You take away you take away the natural element of how that person would have developed, whether it be straight, gay, whatever it may be.
Well, and I think that's the danger. The nature, we live on a planet that for whatever reason, whether you believe in intelligent design or evolution, this planet as an ecosystem, as a closed ecosystem, is astonishing. The fact that from the sub-microbiological level all the way up to the biggest pachyderm or whatever, that this whole planet, if you look at how plant life works, and it's amazing, amazing. And all we've done, human beings, especially in the last couple of 100 years, has been interfering with the normal progression of all of this. Let's hunt things to extinction. Let's pollute the oceans. Let's do all of these things that are literally interfering with the closed ecosystem that we rely on to live.
But that's what, when the industrial age kicked in, it advanced us so quickly. You know, we were going from grinding flour to mills doing it.
Yep.
There was a huge. We were going from manual work to factories, being able to do the jobs of the Industrial Revolution threw society forward so quick on a technological level.
Yeah. Well, I know you have to get off this.
Yes.
We've been going now for 2 hours and 43 minutes.
It's felt like 5 minutes.
Actually, we are a little late, so I guess it's 2 hours, 35 minutes, and 51 seconds.
Okay.
According to my timer. It's our longest show. Well, I do want to thank all of our viewers who have stuck with us. And I want to thank everybody that so generously supports both of our channels through super chats and tips and letters. I've got a few letters that I didn't read because they were long, but they're all going to be up on my website. So if you go to the Burnettwork.net, if you wrote in a letter about the show, they'll be up there. So you can read those and respond to people. And I especially want to give another shout out to Jason Spriggs, who did our great graphics. He's a very talented graphic designer. And he put a lot of love and thought. He put as much love and thought into his overlays as Patrick McGoohan put into the show itself.
Yeah, they are
Mr. Raygun. He also does the overlays for my other show, Let's Get Physical Media. And he's a very talented graphic designer, and he is Mr. Raygun. Look him up online. If you ever wanted to know about vintage ray guns from different eras, tin toys, he is the man. And he's got a lot of other projects that are worth looking into. So hopefully he can do more overlays for us in the future for our next show. So what is our future as?
Well, next week, we can either have a change of pace for a week, while we give people a chance to absorb this era of the prisoner. And we could do we did have an idea to do a hot toy.
I know. I think we should.
Special.
We should do one just because. I've got hot toys to open. It would give me a reason. I want this shelf to be full of hot toys right here.
Oh,
I got
okay.
my 7 Samurai. I think we should do that.
Okay, done. So next week, over on my channel, then 8 p.m.
Yeah.
GMT, midday Pacific. We're going to be showing off our little hot toys. Not so little, actually. Or 1-in-6s, we should really say, because some of them aren't official. Some of them are unofficial. So we're going to go through some of our hot toys and just discuss our kind of passion for collecting those, and probably see where the conversation goes, because I don't think it's going to be any of a struggle.
No.
And then we'll start the week after the 2009 prisoner. Now, audience, we got to ask the question. There were 6 episodes in the miniseries of the 2009, about 45 minutes an episode still, weren't they? So do you want us to go through each episode individually of the 2009 series, or do you want us to go through just the whole series in one strum?
That's a good question. By the way, John sends in a tip, and he says, thanks so much for this series. I find some episodes of The Prisoner bring to mind where I was when I listened to your commentary stream for it. The streams aired during Wednesday afternoon rides with my dad. Well, that's very nice of you to say. Very special series indeed. It certainly is. Well, thank you for that, John. I appreciate that. Thanks for supporting the channel. So, yes, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I wanted to get that that was in. I also want to thank, by the way, our moderating staff. I poached Purple Valkyrie from you, I think. She is lovely and delightful, and I could listen to her voice forever. And I think I'm going to be appearing on her show tomorrow.
Oh, great stuff.
Yeah, and I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank, of course, the Richard, my other moderator. I want to thank Bunyan Snipe from the UK, who's a moderator. And I want to thank Robert Pariso. And I don't know if MC Black's here. I don't know who, but I've got a great moderating staff, so I want to thank them. And you can always go to our page, the Post-Geek Singularity page over at the on Facebook, and also on my channel, the Burnettwork. This channel, I am running the film festival, the first annual Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. In the next couple of days, I got like 30 movies at the end. The competition is now closed, but I have like 30 movies. You guys, for a total of over 60 now. Wow. So I'm going to be putting all those up. So thank you for that. And look out, all those talented filmmakers were great. They did a lot of great work. So what about you, Az? Where can people find you?
They can find me. Well, I'm going to be shutting down my Twitter at the end of the month. My New Year's resolutions to get rid of Twitter.
Wow.
So I'll be on social media wise. I'll be on Parler at Heel versus Babyface, and I'll be pushing my Instagram, which is heel_VS_Babyface. And of course on YouTube, Heel versus Babyface, the YouTube channel. If you want to go there, talking all stuff. Had a bit of a one today for the video. I had a bit of a thought of getting out there.
Nice. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody again. I want to thank you. This was such a great suggestion. We're going to keep going, whatever that may be. We'll have to find out whether we're going to do, which is good, because why not? And
I think we've got some decent ideas for some stuff.
I think so.
That could lead to some interesting shows for you guys.
Absolutely.
So and then we'll just see where it goes.
See where it goes. Well, on that note, we have to give a final sign-off.
Oh.
You know what it is.
Be seeing you.
It's a salute.
It is.
It's a salute. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle creatures across these 28 known galaxies, all of you imagination connoisseurs, thanks for taking this ride with us. And I thank you, Az, for being such a great companion on this journey.
Oh, thank you, Mikey Burnham, for saving us again.
Live long and prosper.